Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah wa rabbil alameen. As-salatu was-salam ala rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Highland wa salam bikum. To my Fulbe community, Androma as-salam, Jautali, Jamwali, Jamhamdulillah. Okay, my dear brothers and sisters, how you doing today? Let me give my felicitations. Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi lil-ikhwani fati fi din. Salamu ala mani taba'a huda lil-ikhwani fati fi Africa, Europa, Asia, Caribbean, America, wa kulli makan. Well, my dear brothers and sisters, I will be embarking on a series of talks here, as I promised here the other day, dealing with a very touchy subject to a degree, but a historical fact, and also for us to ponder some elements that we don't discuss, but are starting to pop up now. As many of you have, if you're catching the news, you know they have found this planet that was very close to us in 2016. After hundreds of years of observation, they found this planet approximately be very close to us. And here about a month ago, they even sent out a signal, but it was a faint signal from this region, and it came quickly, but it dissipated quickly, and so forth and so on. The second thing has happened now as this, I forgot what they call it now, the James Webb Hubble, I forgot whatever they call this, the spacecraft they're using to now is outside our solar systems, ran into what is classified as a black hole, has been studying this black hole. Now the other day, something came out of the black hole that's causing a big stir. So we have these elements that are happening above us today. And you say, well, you know, this is very interesting. Well, these events are nothing new. We're starting to see these events more on a grand scale, and the difference is the media is catching on to this. But the media, there was no media in the 1300s or 1400s, 1500s when Fulani Mystic scholars were having bouts with space and also with the creatures on this earth. And when you look back at the genesis of this, our prophet, the Nabi, alayhi salam, he had such an encounter, as you know, about the ascension into the seven heavens, and so forth and so on. There's a lot of conjecture about this, how we can go from dimension to dimension. The dimensions that we're talking about today is things that we don't understand. There's dimensions that we live in a dimension. It's true. We live in a certain confined dimension. But we now know, and what we suspect, is that there are other living aliens, whatever you want to call it, living creatures who are probably here on this earth. I believe they're here on this earth, but they're in another dimension. See, and we cannot see them, but because of their technology, they can see us. And what we also kind of feel is happening is that when they leave their dimension, because they have the technology to do it, they come into our dimension, they use a form, a body form, in order for us to ascertain. See, so there's a lot of things that is happening that is transpired. And I'm just getting you to speed on this because this is very important, because as we start to go into later stages here, we're going to start seeing more. Our African ancestors, not necessarily just the Fulani itself, but all the way from Morocco all the way down South Africa, have had these dealings and so forth and so on. I came across a tape today, a shocking tape of an African American woman back in 1988 who finally gave her story, or this story was hidden for many, many decades, and it now came out. And she was talking about something that happened to her. And it's very interesting that what she had said, she's not a Muslim or nothing like that, but she had these encounters. And something that you hear me say today that I find very interesting from everything I've been seeing. On Africa, we've had dealings on and off with those from the Sirius star system. But if you look in the Americas, the encounters they supposed to have had, and even in Europe, with small gray type creatures that came out from mainly from the Beta Reticula star system. I find this very interesting, very, very interesting. So anyway, we get into, let's see who we have here. We have, my dear sister here. Walaikum salam rahmatullahi. Thank you, my dear sister. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you very much. And, you know, brothers and sisters, when we talk about issues like this, there's a lot of people that, you know, are very skeptical and whatnot. And we have another person here. Let's honor our guest here. Thank you very much, my dear brother. Life is usually carbon-based, so aliens should be black unless mutations take place. Yes, there's conjecture about that, my dear brother. Yes. And, you know, I thought about this Jewish scientist, astrophysics, who was on his deathbed. And they pulled his videos now, but he was interviewed prior to him dying, but he wanted to spill the beans, quote unquote. And he talked about a spacecraft that that allegedly the Navy picked up, and it ended up into the Navy shipyard in Maryland. He said he was there at the time of this encounter. He said the people who stepped out of this spacecraft was 8 feet tall at least. And he said, these are the blackest people I've ever saw. He said they're 8 feet tall and they're very, very black. So yes, you know, there's a lot of stuff to that, my dear brother. Thank you for showing up today. Thank you very much. So let's get into this, brothers and sisters. The scholarship, and when you talk about the Sufi, I'm not going to get deeper into all of the elements of it. We know we have a lot of Sufi sects that are almost bordering out of Islam, okay? And we have a lot of innovations in these groups, no doubt. And we have to weigh those issues and so forth, but I'm not going to discuss all of that, because you pull it up, you'll see Sufis doing so-called a lot of different things. I don't like to use this term, but I'm using it only for educational purposes, okay? But I don't like to use that term. And they have developed into systems that are quite different. But the Sufi scholars who were on the Sunnah, okay, they did not participate in this. But what happened in the 1400s, 1500s, 1600s, 1700s, and the 1800s is students of theirs begin to witness things from them that didn't make sense. So they began to, when they died, they began to have grave worship, because they thought that somehow or another they could still go to them. That's how some of the profound things that they wrote about Fulani mystic scholars, I mean, you know, many mystic suufiyanke is what we call this before the language, and many of these guys were off the chart in their knowledge, and people begin to almost worship them. This is the type of form of court to take people out of Islam, because that's shirk billah. So we had those elements as well. And so here we have Fulani scholars. And again, there's a lot of works that are there in Timbuktu that we can't get to. And in those suppositories, they have a lot of these Sufi scholars who are Fulani, who wrote about many different things, brothers and sisters. See, many of them had journeys, and I'll get into this. They had journeys into the interstellar space. When they came back from these journeys, these Fulani scholars, and I'll give you another one who wasn't Fulani, but he was in Andalus. I'll talk about him in a minute, inshallah ta'ala. And they came back, and what is fascinating about that as I kind of gave you some of this the other day. Let me see where we can find. Okay, they came back from these journeys and they began to write and they began to chart the solar systems. Now, again, we look at this, brothers and sisters, when I'm saying to you here, they did not have telescopes. They didn't have modern devices. They didn't have computer or AI or any other aids of any sort to help them. See, but there's something how you have, I know you're wondering, how are certain individuals allowed to do these things? And what gets me is that when I see these things, you ask the question, now when we start to look at some of these charts, now we're starting to find some of their, their sayings. We coincide with modern science and they write on cue. This is what is scary about it. We're talking about things happened 400, 500 years or more so. Then, and they didn't have this. No, they did not get taught by a Tubab. The Tubab was in the Dark Ages at this time when the Sufi scholars like this were doing these things and having their journeys. And so, and on top of that, you heard me talk about this the other day. I'll give you a name of one. I will discuss him at another time. And I'll give you another one who I love his works. We also have documentation that we can't get to of the same Fulani scholars who had these mystical journeys and with strange outer space creations. They came back on Earth and began to do things. This is why some people begin to worship them, because they saw differences in them. Some of them were at the point to where people would never travel in this region where the lions, unless they were heavily armed, and there was many of them. They carried no weapons of any sort. So when they traveled through these regions to make Rabat is the Arabic word where you have seclusion and you do heavy, very meaningful worship to Subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is part of the Sunnah of Nabi alayhi salam. He did this himself. He went into the mountain range and had deep consultations with Subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is Sunnah. This is not bid'ah, meaning innovations in Arabic. This is not bid'ah, okay? But we have this. And these scholars will go across the savannah and stay in the savannah for a while around the lions. And one such case, and I'll show you him here, is one of our that took place. Now this is almost more than 200 years, I think. I think more than 200 years now. Again, Fulani scholars had this power, brothers and sisters, that they command even the wild animals. And this is what I was telling you before about the dimensions, okay, that allow for our famous people to do this. This was picture taken hundreds of years ago, when they had the crude pictures, where you had to stand still for almost like 15 minutes or something like that. And they big old pop of light, and they did certain things. And, and they did take pictures and so forth and so on. Before that, they had depictions with drawings. The Portuguese were very, very, very good at this. But this is a picture of one of them. And again, brothers and sisters, we look at this and we, I forget the brother's name. I don't see him here yet. He was questioning about what scholar it was that did this. I even had another person even write me, said it was a lie. But I figured him to be Tubab. I don't care, because I wasn't going to give everything. He had not even bothered to even, he looked at certain or someone come and told him something, so he comes to write something to me. Many times I ask them, did you see the whole video? They don't even bother. They just want to comment and talk crazy. But And the brother who always followed me here, he did ask he said, hey, look, who is this guy? I didn't want to talk about who the guy was until I get all his documentation, until I get onto that subject, because it'd be an injustice to him. And I'll cover him, and I'll cover another one. One of my favorite Sufi scholars and so forth and so on, who was on the Sunnah. He was not into bid'ah. Again, in Arabic meaning innovations. So now we look at something, brothers and sisters. I may be doing this in a 3-part series, and I'm dealing with the Fulani Sufi Mystics, their encounter with lions, taming them with Subhanahu wa Ta'ala's words. Now, and the bottom part here is, I'll get into this. You say, what is DMT? I kind of touched on it the other day. Now we get into deeper things. Our mystic scholars had this dimension that they entered into because of their deep, deep philosophical worshiping of Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. They in turn were given things that gave them protection, even against wild animals. And you know, you've heard, if you are Muslim, that certain words of Allah that tends to give what we call in the Arabic language, you see many times in the Quran, as-sakina, meaning peace, tranquility. And the case I showed you of our ancestral brother who was with the lion, when they took this old-fashioned picture, he used Subhanahu wa Ta'ala's words to calm down angry lions. And of course, now this lion was companion. You say, wow. But we've had a companion of the Prophet ﷺ had an encounter similar to this too, way back in the 600s. Similar to this, where he was going through a region and other animals wanted to pounce on him. They wrote that a lion approached him, and there was some like communication of some sort. He escorted this companion from this, animal war zone, so to speak, because you had wild animals like probably wolves, because they have vicious wolves in the deserts. You'd be surprised. In Jazeera Arab, there's some vicious wolves, okay? And you know the story of Yusuf alayhi salam and so forth and so on about the wolves. Again, this is another situation where I don't like to use the word Sufi, of the Nabi, okay, and what happened to him. And Yusuf and Yaqub alayhi salam jami'an, he had ability again from Subhanahu wa Ta'ala where he can communicate with the wolves. So now we get into this. When you start to think about this, brothers and sisters, it may be boring to some other people, but I'm going to say something to you. As we start to get into other ages now, and during this time, we're starting to see things pop up. You should know that things like this was happening with our people. Now you see the Tubab on TV now, they're talking about many different things and so forth and so on. Reason I will say this to you, they're making their discoveries here and there, but they will never get the jackpot, because the final approval to this is Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. You say, well, Yahya, why you say that? Because Subhanahu wa Ta'ala has told us in the Quran, in Surah Shams, verse 5, I believe it is, he says about the universe and the sun in the universe, not to simply worship it, but he's telling you, he said, look, I'm the one who is the master of it. I'm the one who's the power behind it. I'm the one who supervises it. It's his approval. Now you say, well, you talk about it again, Yahya. Here we have all the modern technology. 2016, they just found a planet so close to us after all these hundreds of years. Subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, if he will allow, the tafsirs of this particular verse, he said, he is him who may allow for us to know each other. Finally, they released, Subhanahu wa ta'ala released this Proxima B, is what they're calling it, and it's 4 light years away from Earth. So now you see this. Now you have this part. Now let's get into something. The activation of DMT. You say, well, what is this? DMT is manufactured, but the real DMT is here. When you go to sleep at night, you have vivid dreams, sometimes very colorful. You're flying, you're doing certain things, you see, different episodes in your life. No human being has control of his dreams when he sleeps. If you notice that, you have no control. You can't go say, you know what, today I'm going to go to sleep. I'm going to dream about the baseball game I had when I was 5 years old. Can't do it. You have no control of that. They say that when we enter into sleep, we enter into a dimension where it's near death. This is why you notice a lot of people die in this state. But we also know, too, that DMT is manufactured in the brain, plays an important aspect in our dreams. There's others who are thinking on the same lines as I'm thinking as far as DMT. When this DMT is what is used, we have it, but we don't have enough of it, or Subhanahu wa ta'ala won't activate it to the point to bring you into other dimensions. Our Fulani scholars, DMT levels must have been high. Subhanahu wa ta'ala activate them, allow them to travel and to go into dimensions that we cannot see and understand. Because we have to go back and look at it again and say, when the scholar, the Fulani scholar came back from his journey, he came to start writing and began to draw charts of things he saw in outer space. There's no possible way that he could do this at the time in the 1400s or the 15 to 1600s. We had no equipment to do that. The telescopes and all the other stuff came into the 1800s, and they were primitive. How can this be? When our Fulani scholar here came back from his journey, he came and he started to write. That's why we have problems today, what we call Sufism, because we have too many people worship because we weren't around them. What happened was we have students of knowledge who came around these type of Fulani Sufi masters, saw them performing and doing things that didn't make sense. They began to almost kind of like worship them. And when they died, they started to have grave worship, where they go to them and talk to them as though, and ask them to intercede for them. This is where this came about, why there's a lot of heat about Sufism. Mutasawwuf is what we know this in Arabic language and so forth and so on. And so this has to elevate us to understand what has happened and how this came about. And this DMT, in my estimation, plays a part. When Subhanahu wa ta'ala activates more of it, all human beings have it. It allows for us to go into another dimension. Now listen to me carefully, brothers and sisters. It allows for us to go into other dimensions that we normally will never be able to travel in. Now you say, well, okay, I hear you, Now, the Kemetic people, our ancestors in ancient Egypt, Kemt, also had this. Because if you look at some of their hieroglyphics talking about the outer space, they too had two solar systems that they mastered. One was the Orion solar system, and the other was Sirius, without any telescopes, okay, any modern technology. Okay, they had this. Now, it showed them going up into the space and coming down. They also saw visitors from outer space coming down, visiting on Earth. We have the same thing now in many African countries, and I told you what happened. When the Europeans found out about this, they start to take these obelisks that the Africans from Morocco all the way to South Africa, they came and began to take them, put them on ships, some going hundreds across miles to the ocean to bring them, so that way there would be no discussions about that. The Europeans stole them and took them, so that way they can keep this narrative, as you heard me talk about thousands of times, that the black people stupid. We had nothing. We didn't know how to fix food until the tubab came. We didn't even know how to stay out of the rain. We were so stupid till the tubab came. We were living in trees, eating bananas, and acting like monkeys until the tubab came. We had no languages. We had no intelligence until the tubab came. When they start to find these type of things, they took it. Why do you think they took that? They didn't want no evidence that we had some type of DMT that we used, or not we used, that was given to us, that allowed us to go into different dimensions. So this is something we got. Our brother here says, so let's see what we have to say. Maybe our glands become because with no, that's not the case, my dear brother. I disagree with you here. How, I asked the question, how is it that a man, okay, let's show this picture again. How can a man travel into the universe? And he has to go in some dimension of some sort, because he does this within a matter of minutes or whatever, and so forth and so on. He comes back from this experience. And he begins to chart out the universe. Now, please, how? Tell me. We're talking about well before the Europeans came around, well before their equipment and all their other things. How? See, how can this man, a Sufi master, Fulani Sufi master, who has some sort of travel that happened to him, he wrote about it, and then he comes back and begins to chart out the solar system and things that didn't make sense to us at that time. Now it does make sense, because we now have technology and we confirm these things. This is what I'm talking about. And how can this be? See, so this is, again, issues, brothers and sisters. They may be rich, and it may be kind of mundane. It may be even laughable to a lot of people, but I'm not laughing, because this is part of Fulani history and African history too. So I'm not laughing about it, because it is part of our history and we should discuss it. And we also know, because we have modern technology that talks about this DMT. And the reason why the Europeans, the Tubab today, yes, Subhanahu wa ta'ala has allowed him to build his craft, but he travels through. But well before he even do that, our African ancestors are already traveling without spaceships. As you saw me talk about this, Ibn Arabi, maybe you don't know who he is. He was around, I think, in the 1200s or 1300s. I'm trying to remember right off. He was a Sufi mystic. He would go out into Rabat. You know, Rabat, again, in Arabic, for those who are not up on Arabic, is a term that we have where we go out. You go out into the desert or you go into the mountain. The Nabi alayhi, he had Rabat. He went on Rabat. He went into the mountains. He stays in the mountains for X amount of days or a month and so forth and so on, where he has very, very deep worship with Subhanahu wa ta'ala. See, we call this Rabat. You see Rabat a lot happening in Ramadan, where brothers will get together and they'll go to the masjid and they'll stay in the masjid only. They don't go home to their families. They stay in the masjid for those 30 days. There they worship, read the Quran, and so forth and so on, make dhikr, and this type of thing like this. So this is some of the things we do. But again, Ibn Arabi had a travel. Many scientists now believe that DMT is part of it. DMT is part, all human beings have it. When you dream at night, this dream, there's an activation, and one of the activations of this drug that is manufactured by us is called DMT. That's why when you go to sleep at night, you cannot control what you're going to dream about. You can't say, well, you know what, tonight I'm going to dream about eating 5 McDonald's hamburgers. You can wish all you want. You have control of that. And when you sleep, it's not that the dream is happening all the time from you. When you go to sleep at 8 o'clock, you wake up at 4, that the dream has transpired all the way to 4 o'clock. No, it's only, again, there's a dimension that we enter when we sleep. This dream is only happening a short period of time. But when you look at the nighttime, it looks like it's covered the whole night. This is what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters. This is a mystery. This is a mystery that we have encountered. And the ancient Egyptians, our ancestors, even talked about this thing, but they didn't know about this DMT until recent time. Now we talk about this drug that we manufacture. So when you dream at night, it's like you dream, you go to sleep at 8 o'clock, you wake up at 4 o'clock, you swear this dream has happened from 8 to 4, when it probably happened only at the last third of your dream and only lasted 10 minutes. But to you, it feels like you were in this dream from the time you went to sleep till you woke up at 4 o'clock. You slept 8 hours. This is what we're talking about, brothers and sisters. Just like the same thing when they do this time travel in this dimension. They go to sleep and they go through into these dimensions, and they ended up in these regions and areas up into the solar system. I mean, the universe. They come back, and as we talked about this, they come back and then they begin to. This experience is so profound that they start to write things. So that's why, brothers and sisters, this is part of African history. This is part of Islamic history. And what makes this so interesting is part of Islamic history from the time of the Nabi alayhi salam, who made his travel into the 7 heavens. Scientists believe that DMT, if there's an activation of it, will allow us to go into different dimensions. Now, this sister, African-American sister, in 1988, she said she was taken again by the same beings that took. Remember this famous case, Barney Hill and his wife, what's her name, Betty Hill. They were taken by beings from the Beta Reticulum star system. Now, 20 some years later, this sister, African-American sister, had encounters with the same people who they took her. She talked about them, how they told her how she can leave to go from one dimension to another. She mentioned this in this video. So we're into an area here where it's very interesting. And the reason why I'm talking about this today, because they have now made the recent discovery of Proximity B, which is a planet so close to us, we can get it within 20 years. Some said we can get it with modern, with maybe some other, we can probably even shorten that time. But all these hundreds of years, we never found it. Subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran that if he will allow, He will allow us to know each other. It's him who makes the decision because it's him who controls the universe. But the Europeans and the Tubab, Chinese, and everybody else are floating through in and out of the space, but they're not gaining knowledge. I mean, they're gaining knowledge to a degree, but why did they have the same thing like this Fulani scholar had? Why did they not have what Ibn Arabi had? Ibn Arabi said he traveled into a dimension. He went to different solar systems. And what makes this so scary, what he talked about is that one of the beings that he met on this one planet, way out somewhere, told him about a calamity that will happen between the years of 2020 to 2025, which we're in now. Now listen to this, brothers and sisters. This was in the 1300s when he had encountered this dimension, and these aliens told him, because they were far advanced, these beings far advanced than we are, told him that between the years of 2020 and 2025, we'll have economic calamity. Don't we have that today? Where we can't afford rent. It's hard to find food, afford food. Everything's off the charts, clothes, everything's so expensive. But in his travels also, brothers and sisters, he talked about a beings that had manipulate water and air and clouds. We're starting to see that now, where people are starting to see things, and they have charters. We had military aircraft, we had airlines going through, and suddenly through a cloud, they see a square object in the cloud. It didn't make sense. See, all these things is happening. So I'm touching the subject now because these things are starting to come forth. Proximate B, what is so significant about that is only 20 years away, so to speak. 20 years, that's all. 20 years away, we can reach it. What's interesting about this, brothers and sisters, that there's a signal that came from there that hit this Tubble spacecraft. It came very quickly and it dissipated very quickly from this region. So now I hope I got your interest, especially those who come later or review this tape, because this is a very, very, very interesting phenomenon, brothers and sisters. Very, very fascinating. The aesthetic worship that is prevalent in Islam, which is prevalent in Islam, is a very touchy area in Islam, because you can go to extremes. When you begin to all worldly things, you throw out. The Prophet subhanahu wa ta'ala says mizan. We use the word mizan. Mizan means the middle path in all things. So even if we have worship, we should not be too extreme in it. This is one of the problems we have with many of the Sufis. They say that I'm going to go and do this, and they take it to an extreme. This is why you have to be very careful. That's why I told you I don't belong to anything. The genesis of the aesthetic worship and travel in other dimensions deals with the brain substance DMT. We're starting to see this. Scientists believe, but they themselves who are not Muslims, they're short to talk and say they believe that a supreme being access or activates this DMT. All of us have DMT when we go to sleep. You have vivid dreams of oceans. You have vivid dreams of you're sitting in a coffee shop, or you have vivid dreams when you were a child. This is where this DMT comes in. But I also believe that when this DMT is activated, it can take you into different dimensions. See, this allows, brothers and sisters, for what we were talking about before of the brothers doing this. See, the animals live in our dimension. We know them, we think of them as jinn, that they are supernaturalized creations. But they also see other dimensions. I give you an example of that. In Islam, we believe that the dog, when the dog, especially early in the morning, hours at nighttime, he begins to bark at something, they say that he sees the devil or the shaitan, the demons. That's why he do this. And the place where I was living before I moved over here, I had a video of this too. Every morning, these dogs would come to my residence where I was living, and they would walk with me to the masjid. Many, sometimes 6, 7, sometimes 10. This is no lie. I have one video. I think I have one video left because they took the others. But the people who lived around me, if you go question, they would not deny it. There was one dog in particular. They finally poisoned her, and it really, really upset me a lot. She would lead the pack. She was a female, and she's red because we have many different type of dogs here in Africa. And she would howl and everything. And at nighttime, I saw them make a lot of barking and everything. And I started to go back in studies and started to find where we had writings about this. And the Prophet ﷺ gave us guidance about the dogs with their, why they're barking and so forth. And we also about the roosters, the chickens, making their things because they see, we supposed to say alhamdulillah and so forth and so on. We have all of this. And this, brothers and sisters, is an element that is fascinating because here we have a Fulani Sufi master, here scholar. His words, in his case, I'll get into him another day. His case, he had, because this lion killed his donkey and ate him. When he went to go look for him, he encountered this lion and his pride. And I won't go into the words that he said, but he said in effect certain words that we know from the Quran. And this lion was tamed because the lion could have came and ate him, and they had a good meal. They just ate his donkey. From this point, because he was in another dimension, he could go around into the areas of the lion, okay? And the lions would accompany him. The same that happened to the companion of the Prophet ﷺ. When he went into this one region, there was a lot of wild animals. A lion came and approached him to escort him in this area out to safety. This is documented as well. When his brother said to me it was a lie, that there was no such thing as this, I didn't want to get into it at that time because I was going to do a program, because I'm not going to go and disrespect my ancestral brothers by just giving you half of something. I'm going to give you the full picture of what they were doing and things happened to them and give you explanations to what I believe happened to them. This situation here, we're in the wild. We're actually in the wild. And anybody understood about the West African lions, they're no joke. As lions anywhere, but these West African lions are no joke. We know that. And our Fulani scholars, mystics who were going through the Savanah region, had encounters like this with them. See, and so you have to look at that. And I mean, you got you have to look at this, and you have to kind of wonder. And how did our Fulani scholars like this have this type of worship that was so strong and so protective that they could even walk among the lions and the lions wouldn't bother them? This is part of African history. This is part of Fulani history, African history. This is Islamic history as well. And I have to give you this well-rounded education about the Fulani. Yes, we talked about the bandits. We talked about Mujahideen. We talked about the Fulani doing this, the Fulani doing that. But where is the Fulani scholarship in our history? We don't cover that. That's why I make it my mission that I am going to cover my ancestors. And I will do them justice. As I pray for them, I talk about them, the things they did good and the things they get bad and how we can learn from them. This is not grave worshiping because they were Muslims. I read the documents, no different than we go back to read our scholars who talk about issues in the 1400s. We go like Ibn Taymiyyah. We read his books, right? And we pray for him. When we talk about our Fulani scholars, and I'll get into Yusuf Ibn Sayyid al-Fulani. I'll get into him another day. But we have to look at these things, brothers and sisters, and you have to kind of ask questions. What dimension were our Fulani scholars, Sufi scholars were in that allowed them to go through the savannah, go among the lions and do this? That's why I told you I want to get to Timbuktu. I don't care. I hope some aliens from outer space, I don't know what, come and take me and drop me at the suppositories, because they're not letting anybody in there because the Tubab told them, don't let the Africans come in and look at these documents. But we have these Fulani Sufi masters wrote about their experiences. We have things that they wrote and things that they had well before the Europeans came around. The Europeans were in the Dark Ages. They didn't have telescopes and they didn't have computers, any of that kind of stuff at that time. And these things here we know happened because we have documentation, but we can't get to all of it. See? And there's something, and we know now, brothers and sisters, we know that this dimension that we're talking about here has to do again with this DMT. Scientists have discovered now that this DMT has some ability, because when you sleep at night, as you heard me say, when you sleep at night, this DMT activates in our brain. Allows you to have vivid dreams. You can go from one area to another area. You notice that about your dreams sometimes don't make no sense. Sometimes you're flying in the air, or you'll go back to your childhood, or you even have conversations with people in the future, or whatever the situation may be. They attribute this to this substance that's in the frontal lobe of the brain called DMT. But also we believe this DMT, when activated, allows us to go from the dimension that we understand to another dimension. We know also that these beings from outer space who leave one dimension, which we know they're here. We know they're here on this earth, and they enter into our dimension that we know of. They put on a human body or an animal form or something like this so we can discern. All this type of thing is out there, brothers and sisters. And I talked about Ibn Arabi and his travels. The one thing that the one thing that got me is his travels. When they took him to another region and they talked about these people. He said this one planet was nothing but cloud and mist. These particular beings were out of gravity. Their technology, they spoke through gravity, and everything for them was gravity. They had the power to manipulate air and water, especially the clouds. Now we're starting to see, which has been going on now for a while, this type of thing has happened where people spotting into clouds, where the manipulation, they see these things up in the square shapes and so forth and so on. And now people have sightings talking about this issue. And so I'm giving you a lot of this. I'll read his works to you. I cannot do it today. I don't have enough time. I'm going to cover his section by himself. This is one famous Fulani Sufi master. And what brings me, when I had his works for a time, to tears, is when I read the first line. He said, I want the future generations of the Africans, the Fulani, those in the Sahel. And now this is predicted hundreds and hundreds of years before. And he said he wanted to leave this message. And he told in the first, and I give you part, he says, I am Yusuf Ibn Said al-Fulani. When we talk about Pan-Africanism, the brothers of today have nothing on our Fulani Sufi scholars and our Fulani scholars of the past. They have nothing on them. They were the true Pan-Africanists. And they let you know who they were. In his works, he repeated many times who he was. I am Yusuf Ibn Said al-Fulani. This should be inspiration to my Fulani brothers so you understand the meaning of being Pulo. And when you say me Pulo, it's more than just saying this. You must carry the traditions of our ancestral brothers who used their platform to give you something for end times, to bring you closer to Subhanahu wa Ta'ala. When these beautiful works that they wrote and the dimensions that they appear to have access to, because the things that they write and the wisdom is so profound, you try to ask, how did they get this? So when you hear the Pan-Africans talk about the leaders we have today, they're nothing. They're nothing compared to our ancestral brothers in the past. Nothing. When they wrote, they talked about certain things that you should be doing. They did it. When they talked about themselves, about being a black man, they did not put their head down. They did not be shameful of it. They did not say, I'm ashamed to be Fulani. You see all these scholars, from Timbuktu especially, you always find them, they will let you know who they were. They'll tell you they're a black man. They'll tell you they're Muslim. They'll tell you they're a black man. And then the Fulani in particular, then they'll tell you I'm Fulani. In his works, you see him come in the paragraphs, he's giving you all this wisdom. Some of the wisdom you trying to figure, I have to use this. Where in the hell did he get this? And then he'll close the paragraph by saying, I am Yusuf Ibn Said Fulani al-Fulani. When I read the works the first time, it brought me to tears. I saw and felt my ancestral brother, my ancestral father give us something for us to emulate today. Not just to say me Pulo, but to back up the works. When we see our ancestors and how they were, we should emulate them. And when you see these brothers doing this, doing that, doing this, and you hear them pronounce who they were. I am Muhammad Ahmed al-Fulani. I am Yusuf Ibn Said al-Fulani. I am Ahmed Baba al-Fulani. This means something. Why I told you the other day, I was leading you to this point about the chosen. The Fulani scholars had this type of ingenuity and knowledge. How did they get it? How did they come upon this type of knowledge and a dimension that allowed them to walk in the Savanah region to the region of where the lions and go sit down, read the Quran, and they go around him. They don't bother him. In other cases, we have another brother like this who had his donkey killed. He walked up to the lion with the lion, and his pride could have killed him, and he could have fed him to his pride. He said a few words from the Quran to him, and he tamed him, gave what we call in the Arabic language, we have it in Quranic Arabic, as-sakina, means tranquility, bringing peace. Not peace and war, but a type of worship of peace. Our Fulani scholars had this. This is why you understand now, brothers and sisters, why I talk a lot about my ancestral fathers. And I'll say this to you, I have to use this vernacular like this. I don't give a damn about those who don't like it. Because why I say that, because those men were pious men, and we can learn from them. If we had leaders like that today, we would not have the problems with the Tuba. We wouldn't have problems with all this corruption and stuff going on. We wouldn't have all these economic problems that we see today. See? That we have these problems now. We have all these problems. I mean, severe problems. I don't care who takes over. We can never solve these problems. And nobody talks about our great ancestral fathers. Nobody. They talk more about the soccer, the football, about track and field, about singing and dancing and so forth and so on. But nobody wants to cover the Messina. Nobody wants to cover the great Fulo, those great sultanates. Nobody wants to talk about Takrur. Nobody wants to talk about Andalus, where our ancestors, the Fulani and the Senike and the Bambara, the Wolof and the Sire, all these people went up north and kicked butt. Nobody wants to talk about that. Nobody wants to talk about our ancestral brothers and their great, great scholarship. Nobody wants to talk about them. Nobody wants to pray for them. Well, I say it here, excuse my flag, but damn it, I will do it. I'm doing it. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah alam, Allah clearly, because I have to use this type to make an emphasis, a point of saying, I will do this. I will venerate them, talk about them, about their piety and how strong they were in Islam, talk about their scholarship. And I will talk about this history of our people that nobody talks about, as though it don't exist. These men were better than us. These men were more pious than us. These men had more knowledge than us. These men spoke the Arabic language and the Fulbe language, and they kept their Fulani heritage. When you hear them, when they name themselves, you hear when they talk about themselves, they always had the inclusion of Al-Fulani in it. To let you know and the future generations know who he was. See, and so this, again, brothers and sisters, when we get into works of the famous Fulani mystic scholars, we get into their works, you get to see and introduce who they were, and you see what they write. I will talk about his writings, because you can't talk in 2 minutes about that. I will not do injustice to my ancestral father. Cannot. I just only mention this part because it's so beautiful how he talks and he says, I'm writing this for the future generations of the Fulani, and for the Fulani, because he already knew that we were going to dwell in the Savanah and the Sahara. He knew this. And he wanted you to know who he was. So when he wrote, and on the first paragraph, he says, I am Yusuf bin Said al-Fulani. Jem, alhamdulillah. Jem, alhamdulillah. So, brothers and sisters, now you have something about this, and I'm going to cover the rest of this here, the general education of the African. Knowing that profound things happen on this continent. Brothers and sisters, we're starting now, it's opening up. We do have African scholars starting to expose the history. From the continent, from all the way from Morocco, where I live today, to South Africa, we had Africans involved in these dimensions. We know the ancient Kemetic people of Egypt were in these dimensions because they showed on their hieroglyphics them going into a spaceship, into the outer space, coming back, charting Sirius and Orion star systems. Well before the Tubab had this, which was in the 1800s. You're talking 1,000 years before that. And the Fulani was instrumental in this. This is why I was telling you the other day, leading you to this point. Subhanahu wa ta'ala kept us a lot in the savannah and in the regions of the Sahara. And it was for some Allah alam. I do not know all of this, but I have to ask questions about that. How, he kept us in this region. But then when you start to see some things, brothers and sisters, when he kept us in these regions, he gave us things. Our people, our smartest and most intelligent, pious people were doing this that we could not even dream of doing today. They would come back from their dimensions that they had and draw what they saw up in outer space. Others came back and began to perform surgery on the heart. That's right, brothers and sisters. Others came back from their journeys and began to perform eye surgery. This is all documented in the documents of Timbuktu, in the suppositories at the university. Nobody talks about our great ancestors. Nobody. I mean, incredible. Incredible. But I make my point. I don't care if it's only one person to listen to me. That's fine. But I'm going to talk about our great ancestors and our Fulani people in particular, because of the strife that we're going today. You should have solace that you have pious ancestral fathers like this, and you should know them. Because when our ancestral brother made his treatise, when he wrote, he wants you to know. He stopped at a paragraph, he enters the next paragraph, he tells you again who he was. I am Yusuf ibn Said al-Fulani. So you get this. Now you understand that. The Kemetic and other Africans depict drawings of their travels. We're in a dimension. This DMT, in my estimations, has a role in this. And when activated by Subhanahu wa ta'ala, again, for those coming late, the DMT is a substance, chemical that we manufacture when you sleep at night. How many can go before you go to sleep? Hey, you know what, man, I'm going to dream about this pretty girl tonight I saw on the street. Nobody has control over dreams. Nobody. And there's a special dimension that you enter, because you go to sleep at 8 o'clock, you wake up at 4, and you remember the dream you had. But you think that dream happened all the way from 8 o'clock to 4. No, you were in a dimension. That dream only happened 5 minutes, maybe 10 minutes. But it made you feel that you had dreamed this thing the whole night when you did. This is what I'm talking about, brothers, these dimensions. When they entered into this dimension, they came out and they mapped out locations and planets. They learned the heart surgery. They learned eye surgery. How they get this? The Europeans did not do this first. We did it. We have documentation proof in Timbuktu University that they were doing this. How about the Nabi alayhi? He had made his ascension to the seven heavens. We know that this DMT chemical that's in our brain, when Subhanahu wa ta'ala does something to us, he allows us to go into other dimensions. I told you earlier in my program, a sister who claimed she was abducted in 1988. She's from California. She was abducted by the same beings who abducted another couple, a black and white couple, 20 years or so previously. These beings told her they were from the same solar system we know today as Beta Reticula. That's what we know this as, their solar system, which is outside of ours. She said in this episode that there was a female and another male who was examining her, talking to her, and one was talking to her again about dimensions. How do you go from your dimension to another dimension? She talked about that in her video. Anybody wants to know about that, please let me know. I'll give you so you can watch the whole interview. Very, very interesting. So the story illustrates the common theme in Sufism and other spiritual traditions. A person's strong faith and connection to the divine, to Subhanahu, can lead to miracles or protection, even from powerful and dangerous forces like wild animals. It suggests spiritual dominion over the natural world instead of just a physical presence among animals. Somehow or another, brothers and sisters, this last part here, the physical presence, yes, you walk past the dogs. Yes, you walk past the cats. But there's a dimension that you enter, see, that gives you certain protections or something, a connection. Like the Prophet Solomon, we know him as Suleiman in the Arabic language, in Quranic Arabic. Solomon had that. He could talk with the ants, and he had also talk with the jinn. He had this power that Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave him. So the presence here of the physical presence among the animals. You walk among them, yes. But there's something happens when you enter another dimension. They see you and they begin to manifest themselves like this. See? And this is what we talked about today. And this is a history, brothers and sisters, that I wanted to talk about today because I want you to see this and understand your Fulani history, not only the jihads that happened and everything else, but I want you to have a well-rounded history so you can understand your Fulani heritage. It's just more than herding cattle and gaining riches. We had scholarship, but we had extraordinary scholarship as well, like this. We know also that some of our learned men and their wives, they had wives that had something that they were special sisters. They were not like many of the modern women we know today, because she understood that her husband was special. She understood her husband had some deep connection with Subhanahu wa ta'ala. So she did not compete with her husband because she understood the man that she had was not a man that was going to hurt her, or a man who would go and play around with her. I mean, play around with other women, or a man who would mistreat her. So they themselves were special. And these brothers had outstanding wives. You can imagine, because if they had modern women we have today, I don't know, they would never be able to stand it. Especially in America with the American woman, the way she's at, her lifestyle and so forth and so on, they wouldn't stand a chance with the Fulani Sufi masters and so forth and so on. They would see through it. They would never marry a woman like that anyway. But they did have wives, and they had special women in their own right. These women were not stupid and ignorant, but they knew their place. They knew that their husband has special connections. They knew their husband were special people. So they did not compete with him. They did exactly what the Prophet ﷺ told him to do. You be a guide, and you offer things to him. You make sure you take care of his children. You make sure you take care of him. You give him advice when it's needed. This is hard for women to do this today. Many women will see a man like this. Their first thought is devilish. They say, I'm going to destroy this man. I'm going to take him out from his worship from Allah. I see how he is. I'm going to destroy him. This is many of the modern women, their mentality. They would never get close to the Sufi master anyway, because he would see through them. The angels will probably come to him and tell him, look, you're going to marry a devil. So don't marry this girl. So brothers and sisters, I gave you this lesson today, and I'm hoping that, again, well-rounded history of African history, well-rounded Fulani history, I talk about, because I wanted this out. I'm going to talk further about our ancestral brothers, two ancestral brothers in particular, in another episode, and so forth and so on. And I wanted you to get an understanding, and a brief understanding again about this and about these dimensions. Brothers and sisters, you guys do your research on this DMT. It's manufactured in our brain. Recent discoveries now have attributed many things to this. This DMT is very responsible for your dreams that you have. Do your research on it. I contend, and there's others, but they're not Muslims, because they know how to explain this. But they contend, they believe that Subhanahu wa Ta'ala activates a certain amount of it. This allows you to communicate in other dimensions. But you heard me say earlier. And these other dimensions, again, allows you to do this. It allows you to be among the lions and to tame them. It allows you to sit among them. It allows you to go through the savannah with them, and they offer protection from other lions and other wild animals. See, so brothers and sisters, if you can't see something here, I want you to come back and look at this again. And you pray to Subhanahu wa Ta'ala and ask him to give you guidance on what Yahya is talking about. Because if you can't see something here, then I suspect that your worship and your relationship with Subhanahu wa Ta'ala is not right. Because our ancestral brothers had this. And what is intriguing about this, brothers and sisters, is our Fulani Sufi masters spent a lot of time in the Sahara, sometimes among themselves, by themselves, Other times they would be with brothers and they would stay there and worship. And they have made references to things that happened even when they were alone that entered into our atmosphere. This is why I want to go to Timbuktu. I want to read the Fulani scholars who are astrophysicists. When they went into the Sahara and they began to witness things in the sky falling down to the ground where they were at, or giving them some instances of travel. I want to read this. When they came back from their travels, they wrote. I want to read this. Ibn Arabi had one of the most famous takes, which he was talking about the dimensions that he went in. And when he went to this one planet, they wanted to take him to another. And they gave him evidence to, they say, look, on your earth, what's going to happen to the human beings from the years 2025, they're going to have great economic strife. We've had that. We still have it, where we can't afford nothing. They told him that. He wrote when he went to his travels. And now we're starting to see what he talked about as well. He said that these beings were very kind to him, that they said, we're going to take you to another solar system, because they had some power to go from dimension from one area to another in a short period of time. It's the same equivalent to your dream at night, brothers and sisters. Now you see something here. I'm hoping you get this. That dream that you think is lasted for 4, 5, 6, 7 hours only lasted 10 minutes. But when you wake up, you feel that you have traveled for 8 hours, haven't you? When you have your dreams. You think you've been in there for 8 hours in this dream. You were playing baseball, or the sisters you were talking about, you had a party. You remember back in high school, when it was only a matter of minutes. This is the miracle from Subhanahu wa ta'ala. They say this DMT plays a role in that. Ibn Arabi talked about this strange planet he went to, where it was nothing but clouds and mist. But these people were actually the clouds and mist themselves. They were some entity that lived in these clouds. And they can manipulate the clouds and the air. Now we see on Earth being reports almost every week of things in the cloud. One square-shaped black metallic craft of some sort hovering in the clouds, especially when there's thunder. We have many cataloging this. Ibn Arabi already talked about them over 600 years ago. He talked about these same people that we're starting to encounter now, who we see in the clouds. All of a sudden you see a metallic metal, like a V-shaped, triangle-shaped craft that's hovering in the clouds. It doesn't make sense. What could be there? He's already had the encounter over 600 years ago. See, so brothers and sisters, this is a different talk. And if you don't understand, go back again, pass this on to others and review this again. If it's not quite understanding to you, ask Subhanahu wa ta'ala to give you guidance on this. And ask Subhanahu wa ta'ala about the Sahaba of the Prophet ﷺ who went into a region like this. And there was wild animals all over the place. Subhanahu wa ta'ala sent a lion to come to the companion as a companion, as a guard, a guard or a protector. And he protected him all the way through this one region so no other animals would get to him. Other animals who saw him stayed away because the lion. When he got to this region where he was safe, the lion turned back and left. This is documented. So we have all of this. We have documentation of our astrophysicists, Fulani Sufi masters, coming back, drawing sophisticated charts and maps, mathematical equations that at that time didn't make no sense, but today they deciphered them and it's true. See, so I mean, we have to look at all of this, brothers and sisters, and you have to look at your Fulani ancestral fathers. You should look at them in a special way, and you should have a special regard and love for them in your heart. When you see them, you should emulate them. When you say that you say mi pulo. Are you holding up to what our ancestors had did when they announced themselves? When they said, I'm Ahmed Baba al-Fulani. I am Yusuf Ibn Saeed al-Fulani. Are you holding up to this tradition? See, you ask that question. So, brothers and sisters, today was kind of fiery. I had to use some choice language, but I had to make my points, and I wanted to get this particular topic out. And a lot of this is conjecture because we don't have all evidence, especially about the DMT. It's speculation. But we know DMT plays a part because when you dream at night, and I'm giving you instances for you to think about, because you're traveling, you're going in a dimension that you heard me talk about, that you enter into a dimension that you normally don't enter when you are awake. And you feel when you wake up as though you were in this dream for 10, 12 hours, whatever time you sleep, when you were only actually in that dimension for a couple of minutes, but it felt like you were there for 8 hours. You have to wonder about that. You should wonder about that. Now I give you the impetus to do the study and start to think. The outer dimension from this DMT that you have from your dream is this. See, that same DMT chemical that's produced in your brain that gives you the vivid dreams also plays a role in this, that the animals, because they say the animals can see in other dimensions. And our Fulani scholars had mastered this. Subhanahu wa ta'ala gave them this that allows them to do the things I'm talking about. See, this is what makes this so fascinating. You have to wonder. We have a guest here. Let me see what we have. Yes, my dear cousin. Wake up, alaikum salam. How you doing, my dear cousin? Thank you for showing up today. I appreciate that. I hope you review this tape here to go over this about your Fulani ancestral fathers and how they lived in a dimension that we today wish we could have and inspire to do. But we don't have that because Subhanahu wa ta'ala has not chosen us for that. And I talked about that today. Thanks for showing up, because this is a very, very very touchy subject, but it's thought-provoking for you to go back. And you can start with your dreams. And you now have the emphasis to see what I was talking about. That dream that you have is not 8 hours. The dream that you have is only minutes long, but in the dimension you were in time, it appeared as though when you woke up, you were in this dream for hours, when in fact it was only minutes. I mean, all this should intrigue you. And how did our Fulani Sufi masters, how did they master this? They internal and then external. The external, that they could walk among the lions and so forth and so on. See, so all of this, brothers and sisters, I put at your disposal today. And again, for those come late, this DMT here, you do your investigation on this. It's very, very interesting. And we have it. And recent discoveries about the DMT is very interesting. They can manufacture DMT. When they manufacture it, they put it into a drug form. It gives you like that. Remember that, or they used to call it in my day, we call it LSD. I think it's what they called that. I forgot. It's psychedelic drug. It make you dream all kind of weird things and so forth and so on like that. The DMT gives you this. But then also DMT also allows you to go into other dimensions, like we talk about and we show here and whatnot. So brothers and sisters, I'm going to go here now. I'm getting close here to Salat. And I think this is enough for today. I'm hoping that you guys got something out of this. If you like this, please subscribe. But I really appreciate that you go back and look at this and review the pondering evidence that I gave you today for you to think about this and ask the question about this and ask about your Fulani ancestors, your ancestral fathers, how they were so pious and how Subhanahu wa ta'ala blessed them with so much, and how he gave them this knowledge. He gave them this specialty that's not given to everyone. And the last time for that, to do this. To do this. To do that. To be among the lions like this. And to worship in the Sahara, have close relationship with Subhanahu wa ta'ala, and he brings you into a dimension that the others cannot see. It's very fascinating. And our Fulani brothers who have families in the Sahara, and the beautiful African Fulani sister who's the wife to a Sufi mystic, she in her own right are a wonder as well. So I'll leave you with that. Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, Anzaram.